Hey, Section 3. I hope everyone is doing well. I just putting together the weekend wrap up. Got done reading all the good stuff that you guys had done this week. Really had some interesting discussions going on, and appreciate everyone's efforts to engage on in regards to the literature and as well as in regards to your own personal experiences. I always, I want to hear you guys analyzing the data and looking at the literature, but I always enjoy hearing about what people are doing, how they're going to change, if they are going to change, maybe they're not going to change in some instance, and how that all kind of plays into their whole clinical practice, and then how we interact with each other. I had some interesting interactions. So nice work. In regards to the week in review, I'm just going to briefly go through some of this stuff. In the Combs article, cortisone long-term worse, but PT no better with the use of mobilization with movement. I think the important thing here is that and everybody seemed to gauge this, is that cortisone is really not the answer. People get sometimes can get some fairly quick results, but in long term, that's not the way we want to go. And the better we are at our jobs, the less we need this. I think that's really the big issue here. Can we do our jobs the correct way so that we don't need to go down that road? The Vincentine article about the clinical prediction rule, important thing: patients who are younger than 49, who had that painful grip and affected side, and low painful grips on the unaffected side, they were most likely to respond to intervention. Hopefully, all of you have some kind of grip dynamometer that you can register that. It's easy enough to do. It's also very helpful when utilizing the mobilization with movement technique. I use it all the time. It can be very effective, as well as helps patients. It's a great feedback tool, that test retest idea, a great feedback tool for the patient, because they can look at that grip dynamometer and be like, hey, I'm gaining strength, less pain. It can be very powerful. Just remember that severity of pain and duration of symptoms were the prognostic indicators, and they did not contribute to the clinical prediction rules. I thought that was kind of interesting, that we need to kind of pay attention to. That we oftentimes think, God, if they have a ton of pain, how are they gonna respond? But yet that didn't bear out in the clinical prediction rule. So something to think about as we move forward. So the WA article discussed the whole concept of algia versus itis, and I do think that I heard a lot of people. Some people were starting to intermix the two. I know some people have gotten away from the algia term. We really need to do that. We need to educate our patients. We need to talk about tendinosis. We need to use that term more commonly. We need to talk about the itis as being kind of old school, bursitis, tendonitis, all those things. The literature just doesn't point us in that direction, and then we need to be able to explain that. You need to be able to articulate what is happening. You can't just say, well, it's just this way now. You have to be able to describe to them in some detail what is actually happening. So do not ignore the current literature. Consistent evidence continues to point us away from the absence of inflammatory component. Okay, so in the Bassett, the review, the range of outcomes for lateral epicondyle have failed to draw any firm conclusions as to what to be considered the best treatment, old school versus injection. We need some better treatments. Some of the stuff that we saw this week was really good. We saw some good literature with some good impact. Some of the other literature, even the regional interdependent stuff, those are some smaller studies. They have, the effect sizes aren't huge. We need to probably have even better literature to help really guide us in the direction that we need to go. But I think we're definitely getting to the point now where we can say, the mobilization with movement techniques are really strong. Whether the Struhaus wrist stuff is going to hold up under a bigger trial, that could probably be called into question. And we need more definitive answers on how this regional interdependence approach really affects our patients, but it's definitely something we should be utilizing. So in the Boucher presentation, biggest theme is of regional interdependence. Continue to look above and below. When I manipulate the wrist all the time, it's an easy technique to do. I probably don't do it on the first visit, because oftentimes I find people that tugs on that whole radial nerve, and people don't really like that. So that probably is like once we get that pain down. But often it's so easy to go into the cervical spine and do some AP glides in cervical spine, manip CT junction, do some radial nerve glides, do some lateral glides away. So gliding, if it's right elbow, lateral glides left, with some tension on the radial nerve. Great way to do that. Sending them home with radial nerve glides I also found to be very effective. Obviously, Fernandez Carnero also demonstrated cervical manipulation in the pressure pain thresholds reduced. Cleveland article, again, very good, that cervical and thoracic spine manipulations are very effective. I do manipulate my cervical spine or my elbow patients in the cervical spine, and I do explain to them what is happening. I don't do that on the first visit. I might do that second or third, but I certainly mobilize cervical spine, and usually AP glides as opposed to PA. I find those to be most effective. Again, radial nerve glides is something I really use. And then there's also some talk about scapulothoracic. I think it was Anthony talked about scapulothoracic stabilization, and I totally believe strongly in that. I tell my patients all the time that you have to have a firm base. If you do not have a place for that scapula, that shoulder girdle to rest on, then everything that you do from a reaching standpoint is compromised. You end up putting a lot more strain. And oftentimes I find that forearm musculature is working very hard because their scapulothoracic whole area is not. So then what do? A lot of rows, a lot of supermans, a lot of side planks, a lot of strengthening in that whole shoulder girdle in weight bearing. Again, I talked about that last week with shoulder impingement. I'm going to talk about it again. I love weight bearing. Put them in weight bearing, get them to strengthen in those ways. Can be very helpful in moving them forward. So again, mobilization is movement. And I didn't even mention this kind of self-mobilization. I think that can be a highly effective tool with the right patient. Sometimes the motor skills required to do that technique can be a little bit awkward, but if you find the right person, it can be effective. And because I do use that, I'll tell you, even I will do that mobilization technique in both directions. So I will glide laterally and glide medially with at the elbow. So just because if one way is good, maybe another way could be better. Again, no research, just clinically. When I was in my fellowship, we talked about doing this, and everybody kind of agreed that why not give it a try. So once you've done the technique where you're gliding more laterally, I come back in and glide a little medially. If I get bang for my buck, then I keep doing it. If I don't, I'd move on. And that's that whole concept of test retest, obviously continuing to play itself out. So So I saw, as far as comments go, I saw many people using direct treatments. Lots of people are using soft tissue techniques, eccentric training, mobilization at the elbow. So that's good. I think that's good. I think there's value in that. And people seem to be open to the indirect, to the regional interdependence comments. People were willing to try cervical. A lot of people had not had not tried or been exposed to the cervical thoracic mobilization manipulation techniques, and so everybody seemed willing to try, and I would highly recommend it because you will not be disappointed. A lot of people didn't really talk about wrist manipulations, those and the radial nerves, radial nerve glides. I thought people were maybe put those on the back burner, maybe not thinking as much that those would be as effective. I would highly recommend you do that. Engage in those. I felt like the exercise programs were all pretty much right on, except for, again, not everybody was, mentioning scapulothoracic area. Like I said, Anthony did. Some really good, I think it was Jamie Everett had posted a really good article by Cleland and Vincenzino that talked about kind of prioritizing the treatment approach. I thought that was a home run. Bart had talked about the kind of what we do with OTs versus PTs, and I made my comments. I don't really have the answers there, but I think it's a big discussion, one that we should be having. And are we ceding ground to the OTs just because we have enough to do? I feel like OTs tend to get more of our business because we have other things to do, and that we can just let them have certain things. So things to think about. There was minimal mention of dry needling. I think it was Jamie Everett who said that she had been doing dry needling. I dry needling is going to be a bigger deal. You're going to see bigger responses. Right now, there's just some case studies that I've seen that show its efficacy, but I do believe on the horizon, dry needling will have an impact on, and not even dry needling at the elbow, even though I think that's where we're going to go to start with, but I bet you can dry needle further up the chain and get similar effects. Again, it's that whole neurophysiologic response, in my opinion. So more in the future on that, but be aware of that, because I think that those techniques and treatments are very much part of what's going to be happening. Moving on to week 4, carpal tunnel syndrome and other peripheral nerve injuries. Read the syllabus, check the CAT project, comment. So I see that people are posting CATs. It's great. You comment on 2 other CATs in your group. Just Kevin is on vacation. We will miss him. I'm going to take over Charlie, and I will monitor Alpha, and I'll do the responses for Charlie. And again, I try to peek in when I can. And the sooner you guys post, the easier it is for me to get into your group. So if you really want my opinion on things and want me to engage with you guys, the sooner you do it, the more I can. Otherwise, then I'm just really going after. I'm really just kind of following up. And so there were some people who were waiting kind of last minute. And I know sometimes schedules get busy, weeks get busy, but man, if you can just get a couple of comments into your response and just continue to push the dialogue and not waiting till Saturday morning, that would be greatly appreciated. Although I do know that it happens sometimes and life does get busy. Fellow case studies continue. They're going to be engaging again. Feel free to peek in. We won't be switching groups until after week 4. So starting week 5, I'll send you out new groups. I am also going to be gone. I am leaving for Washington, D.C. for spring break with my family, but I'll be easily accessible. I'll have my phone on me. I can respond to emails. I'll have the evenings in which I can respond. I'll be back later on Friday or Friday morning, and so I'll dig in Thursday on the plane and then Friday. So again, hope you all are well. Contact me with any questions. Keep plugging away because this is really good stuff, and I always enjoy reading what everybody has to say.